Greetings and welcome back to the channel. Today I thought I'd go over some current reissues that I hope to go on a little more in depth on as far as reviewing, and then some just OG classics that I've been enjoying as well. And it's interesting, I was listening to WKCR today, and they have the Instagram fellow who calls himself Jazz and Coffee. Extremely informative. If you're on Instagram, I suggest you follow him, Jazz and Coffee. Puts up interesting stuff, has great notes about the recordings. He's sort of the gold standard, I think, on Instagram of reviewing jazz records. So I always learn something when I listen to WKCR, and this was no exception. It goes till about 8 o'clock this evening, which is Sunday. But it's interesting to hear other people's take on the idea of old recordings, new recordings, remasters of old recordings, what they consider to be the most transparent sound. Everybody's a little different. Anyway, this cuts across a wide path, starting with Gotcha, the music of the Mel Lewis Septet. And this was on Mode Records, San Francisco-based label. And really, anything you get with Mel Lewis, the drumming is going to be like a soft shoe dance below, no matter who it is. I also bought a couple Bill Holman records that he plays drums on. And no matter how big the ensemble is, he is so cool. That changes a little bit, perhaps, in the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra at the Vanguard, because Thad Jones, I think, was sort of maybe the opposite personality, at least on the surface, of Mel Lewis. Hard charging, big, you know, part of the Detroit Jones tribe. But a really great record. I've got also his record on Bethlehem, where they have a big drawing of Mel Lewis on the cover. I didn't really care for that as much. It doesn't hold my interest, but this is a really cool record on Mode. Gotcha, the Mel Lewis Septet. In a very similar mode, a record that you cannot go wrong with, that you should have, the great bassist Leroy Vinnegar Sextet, cut at Contemporary Records with Victor Feldman, Gerald Wilson on trumpet, Teddy Edwards on tenor sax, Carl Perkins on piano, and Tony Basley on drums, who I don't know. But this is a perfect West Coast hard bop session. It's anchored so well by Leroy Vinnegar. This is like a record that every jazz lover should own, and it's an easy recommendation. It's such a great session. I have a couple other of those in this segment I'm going to talk about that are just solid hard bop sessions that you should seek out with no hesitation, in my book. Now, there's a new label out of California called Sam's First. I believe they're based around a bar called Sam's First, where they record all the material. Very live sounding, very natural sounding. This record is the Joe LaBarbera Quintet, World Travelers. Joe LaBarbera, of course, the great drummer. I don't know the other players on here. Well, Bob Shepard on saxophones, I know. Bill Cunliffe on piano, but I don't know the trumpeter, Clay Jenkins, and the acoustic bassist, Jonathan Edwards. Now, this is a great example of contemporary jazz, West Coast bass, that deserves to be on vinyl. This pressing is very good. I have 3 of their pressings. I didn't care as much for the first 2 records. They also have a project upcoming that I'm very excited about, with Mark Juliana on drums, Tim LaFave on bass. I forgot the other member. Both of those dudes played on David Bowie's last album, Black Star, I think it's called. But I used to watch Tim LaFave for years at the 55 bar with Wayne Krantz and Zach Danziger, just blowing the walls down before he moved to the West Coast and became, you know, famous through his work with the Derek Trucks Band, I believe, and just a lot of his own stuff. They have a record coming out on Sam's First. Also on Sam's First, a record by Rachel Eckroth, the keyboard player, who is coincidentally married to Tim LaFave. Tim Lefevre, I think is how he spells it. But I thought this was a great, swinging, fun session. Brand new label, Sam's First. Sam First Records. And then, as I said, just solid records you can buy with no hesitation. I will vouch for them. And I've only seen this record once. I love Lucky Thompson, one of the great bridges between the old school and the new school of playing. Just a very hip, modernist player, but with, you know, considerable roots in people like Ben Webster and Dexter Gordon. Well, not Dexter Gordon, it's after this, but this is a great record, bottoms up, with a great quartet. Barry Harris on piano, Ben Tucker on bass, Alan Dawson on drums, the great Alan Dawson, who taught Tony Williams and was also a professor at Berkeley for a long time. This is on Prestige, bottoms up. This is just a great swinging record, and it's great to hear Illinois Jacquet in a small group. I have him on big band stuff. I've been buying more of his records recently. So it's great to hear him later period, not the 50s, on a small group session. Killer record. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I just got this. Milford Graves with Arthur Doyle and Hugh Glover, Children of the Forest. I have a feeling this was recorded, or this photograph is taken from their studio in the East Village called We Studios. Back in the 60s in Soho, in the East Village, there were all these lofts that people such as Sam Rivers famously took over to do their own work. Sam Rivers' studio Rivbea or Rivbea. But this is the epitome of what you might think of as free jazz. And it is wailing. And you can see Milford there. Milford, a powerful, great innovator on the instrument who never really got his due. I only learned about him in the 2000s, really. I didn't know, I'd never heard of him. I'd seen him on the ESP records. He has his own record on ESP. I learned about him from the drummer Susie Ibarra, who played with the David S. Ware Quartet and with William Parker. But this is cathartic music. Not to everyone's liking, but Milford Graves, after he was just a drummer, he became an instructor. He taught at Bennington College, upstate, I believe in Massachusetts, somewhere in New England, and was a shaman, was a doctor. He did some pioneering work on heart rhythms. Just a unique individual, and one of the few drummers I've ever seen. I think of Keith Moon as being the other. I did see Keith Moon with The Who on their Who's Next tour. That what he's playing is not what you're hearing. There's some kind of magic going on. I don't know if I could recommend this album to everybody. If you're into free jazz, definitely. And hey, I just realized Lacquer's cut by Kevin Gray. Does Kevin Gray ever sleep? We're going to find out, because Kevin Gray is going to be on my channel here. He agreed to an interview, and we're going to I'm taking questions from the members of my Jazz Vinyl Lovers group, and I need to watch the Jazz Bums interview. I asked Kevin, what's the best interview you've done so far? And he said, Jazz Bums. So I'm going to check that out so I don't ask the same questions. Now going a blast from the past, Soul Jazz, the label out of the UK, who I think were doing reissues of anything called spiritual jazz before anyone. Blackfire, New Spirits, Radical and Revolutionary Jazz in the USA, 1957 to 1982. And this is a great record. Some of it is definitely free, some of it is not. This is a 3 LP set. Soul Jazz does many, many reissues. There's a little sample on their sleeves. But this one includes material by Yusef Lateef, The Last Poets, Don Cherry, and these are really choice tracks from each one of these individuals. And I don't know if this is from tape, if it's from digital. This is the mid-2000s when these came out. Grashan Moncure, Tyrone Washington, Creative Arts Ensemble, David Lee Jr., Harold McKinney and the Creative People, Lloyd McNeil and Marshall Hawkins, Ferone Acklap, Joe Henderson, Doug Hammond. This is a great set. I was in the UK once. I've been in the UK many times. I remember last time I was there walking down some street and I saw the Soul Jazz record store. The day was not open, so I could not go in. But this is a fantastic compilation. I've been listening to a lot of old comps. If you like jazz vocals, this is my contemporary, most favorite female jazz vocalist, Melanie DiBiasio. She is fantastic. As soon as the needle drops, she conjures a mood. It's really dark and beautiful, very noirish. She's got a beautiful voice. Each record of hers takes a lot of chances and is different from the one before it. And they're hard to find. I've never seen her records in a store. I just buy them online, but they're well worth seeking out. Because man, is she fantastic. And she's a beautiful lady as well. I think she's from Belgium. I have the most recent craft reissue of one of Art Pepper's greatest records. Art Pepper meets the rhythm section, and I'm going to compare it to my contemporary reissue. That will be interesting. This is a freaky title that I recently refound in my own collection by this British group called Tangents. It's a quartet. If you don't know better, it just sounds like electronic music. But these are 4 guys playing, and it sounds like electronic music. But it's highly improvisatory, highly immediate, in the moment. I think they have 2 or 3 records out, but this is unlike anything else I've heard from a acoustic jazz ensemble or any acoustic ensemble, because I love a lot of electronic music, and if you didn't know, you'd think this sounds like kind of quartet-ish jazz. Great stuff. Another one along that line of an easy recommendation, but not an easy record to find, trumpeter Don Fagerquist, Music to Fill a Void, also on Mode Records, like the earlier Mel Lewis record I showed. This also features Herb Geller on alto. Herb Geller is an amazing alto player who never gets any attention. Ronnie Lang on baritone, Ed Leddy on trumpet, Bob Envelson on trombone, Vince DeRosa on French horn, Marty Paik on piano, and Buddy Clark on drums from 1967. This is the epitome of another, what my friend Daniel Van Elsch calls cool bop, West Coast based. It's not hard bop, it's bop, but it's very relaxed, very in the pocket, great improvisations, and maybe most importantly, really great fun tunes. I recently was mailed the Rhino reissue of John Coltrane, Coltrane Sound. Nice photo on the inside. And this absolutely blew away my original stereo copy. Not even close. I even think the cover art is better. I mean, the cover art is so vivid and sharp, and the colors are so saturated. On my original, everything's kind of washed out. But this just, you know, just like Giant Steps, which is a horrible sounding record, it's all bass. This record just doesn't sound that great. None of those, in my opinion, Tom Dowd records that he engineered for jazz sound very good. I don't know, like there's a veil over everything. Things sound one-dimensional. But this great remaster by, I don't know who did it, but these are numbered. Rhino High Fidelity. Awesome. Lately, I've really gotten into, many people in my jazz group, Vinyl Jazz Lovers on Facebook, are already into this, but I recently bought just a ton of Matthew Halsall records, a trumpet player from the UK. And these are wonderful records. They all have a certain mood. They're kind of dark, very languorous, very relaxed. I don't want to call it spiritual jazz. I don't want to put it in that pocket. But there are loose percussion instruments going on sometimes. It's very expansive. It makes you listen. I forgot which one of these I had, but I played it in the store all day, and about 5 people said, "What is that record, and can I buy it?" A great example of contemporary jazz out of the UK that sounds totally current, that you can hear the past in the music, but also the present. He's a real shapeshifter, what he does, and a wonderful trumpet player. I do like electronic music, as I stated before, and one of my favorite navigators of electronic music is this guy named Loskill. This is on Cranky. He's made quite a few records. His name is Scott Morgan, and it's just a certain mood. You know, I bought a bunch of these, and I bought like 5 Biosphere records. Those landed really flat for me. Those sounded kind of rinky-dink. These are dark. His record, Loskill, is dark and expansive, and it tugs at you. It's very atmospheric and like a storm cloud rolling in. Beautiful, beautiful electronic music. And then an old classic from Lalo Schifrin, the soundtrack to Enter the Dragon. There are all these great 1970s era soundtracks by people like Lalo Schifrin and Jerry Goldsmith that trace back to the earlier fantastic soundtracks of people like, who am I thinking of? The guy who did the soundtrack for The Sweet Smell of Success. I don't mean Chico Hamilton, but the actual orchestral soundtrack. Who am I thinking of? Damn, it makes me mad. But that relayed into the 70s, where the music is so foundational to what you're seeing in the film. And this is one of those, about the movie starring the great Bruce Lee. And this has become somewhat pricey. This is the original pressing. These, along like the 70s blaxploitation soundtracks, that's a whole world unto itself, but really cool stuff. Benny Green on Prestige, trombonist, Benny Green, Charlie Rouse, Candido, Paul Chambers, O.C. Johnson. And this record, it's funny, everybody, I interviewed Lenny White, and he loves Curtis Fuller. Curtis doesn't really do it for me. While he's more of a serious technician, probably more developed with a greater language, I really like Benny Green records. These records are so much fun. There's vocals on some tracks that are really great. This is like church music without the rousing shrieking or the overly emotional and overwrought feeling of church music. This is happy music, and I really dug this. Benny Green, Blows This Horn. This is an original Prestige mono recording. Beautiful cover. Don't know if you can see it there, my bad lighting. Another great Lucky Thompson record on Urania. Beautiful cover. As you can see, I have no particular rhyme or reason. These are just things I'm listening to and things I want to go more in depth on, as well as recognize a few current reissues that are worth noticing that you might not see somewhere else. Candid has been doing a ton of reissues lately of their blues catalog, of their jazz catalog, all really well done. I don't know who's doing the work, but this is one they currently reissued in the last batch, a double LP from the jazz vocalist Stacy Kent, The Boy Next Door. And this is a very silent, beautiful recording. This is an audiophile recording. I really dug this. Not everyone likes her voice. I do. It's a very sweet, small little girl voice, but I enjoy it. It's good stuff. Another singer who initially you might think has a little girl voice, then you realize she is all woman, Blossom Dearie. Originally on Verve, repressed by Third Man Pressings in Detroit, 100-gram audiophile quality vinyl. I haven't compared this to my original of this that I have, but this is such a great record. One of the enduring great jazz vocalists. You know, when you listen to her at first, she sounds like a little girl like Stacy Kent, but then you realize, wow, she's really hip. And she's delivering a very subtle, nuanced vocal lecture, really, on jazz. And she's a wonderful pianist. This is done by Third Man. And as I said, the pressing sounds fine, but these sleeves are really, I'm sorry, second rate. They might be okay if we didn't have all these other great sleeves by everybody else and his mother. You know, we're so spoiled by Tone Poet. Before that, Music Matters, for these heavy duty, almost over the top sleeves. But then you get something like this, and it's so thin. I mean, you could tear this if you're not careful when you open it up with your fingernail. So the cover art's fine. Amazing recording. If you don't have this, you should get this. This is great. And recently, finally, after years and years and years of what the fuck are you waiting for, ECM has started to reissue their back catalog. They've done about 6 titles, including Old and New Dreams, with Don Cherry, Dewey Redman, Charlie Hayden, Edward Blackwell, carrying on the forms and music of Ornette Coleman. This is a wonderful recording. Heavy duty sleeves. Many of these are gatefolds, which they were not in the original pressings, which is really cool, with new liner notes, so they are not scrimping. I don't know who does the transfers for these, but I will compare this to my original, which I can't wait. This is a gateway into free jazz. It's not free jazz, but it's a wonderful gateway. It's a gateway drug, man. Another one I will compare, Nana Vasconcelos, Saudades, on ECM. I haven't even popped it yet. They've also done Kenny Wheeler. It's weird, they started a reissue series like 4 years ago, then it just stopped. Now the new series is called Luminescence, and I'm excited about that. And there's some great titles upcoming. I forgot. This should be cool. Nana Vasconcelos, the great Brazilian percussionist who played with Pat Metheny and recorded with Metheny and many, many, many others. It'll be interesting to see what this sounds like compared to my original. Then a couple more Matthew Halsall records. Man, I love these records. You put these on and it's like going to church, or it's really like meditating. Matthew Halsall and the Gondwana Orchestra, Into Forever. I found all these out in a store in Bushwick called Octopus Records. I was actually meaning to go to another store to trade a bunch of records, and I went to that place by mistake, but it turned out to be really great. This little small store in Bushwick. The guy had a high-end system. He had Harbath speakers, a Chinese-made K&N tube amp, a really nice, I think it's a Project 700 RPM turntable. Killing little system. You never see that in a record store. And he had all these Matthew Halsall records, so I traded a bunch of stuff. That's where I got the Lost Skill as well. I would assume that everybody who watches this channel has this record. Cannonball Adderley Quintet in Chicago, with John Coltrane, Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb. This is the Miles Davis Quintet without Miles Davis, and that's what it sounds like. This is a hardcore blowing session. These guys are having a party. Everybody's having fun. Coltrane, who started on alto, almost sounds as much like Adderley as Adderley does. Adderley is always incredibly joyous. I believe this is a Analog Productions reissue, and it's beautifully done. And this is another record, if you're a jazz fan, that you can buy without any hesitation. This is a great recording that I think should be in everybody's wheelhouse, even if you can find an early reissue. This is just great jazz. This is the kind of jazz that made jazz fans out of people who weren't into jazz, because it's just so happy. There's a lot of blues on here. They cover Limehouse Blues, Stars Fell on Alabama, Wybosh, Grand Central, You're a Weaver of Dreams, The Sleeper, the last track by Coltrane. Oh, Grand Central by Coltrane. Killer record, man. What a great record. And then closing up with records I've had for a long time that were put out before Tone Poets began, before Blue Note's 75th anniversary, before any of the majors dipped their feet into reissuing records. These are more Jazzman records, compilations that they called Spiritual Jazz. And each new release covers a particular area of jazz. This one, Volume 2 in Europe, I don't have all the volumes, features among others Michael Garrick, Albert Mangelsdorf, Barney Weiland, Dusko Gojevic, and all these are great. And one of the things these have are liner notes. I've never seen so many liner notes, man. Beautiful, in-depth, extremely well-researched, on-the-money liner notes. And each one of these releases opens a door of a rabbit hole you can dive down and explore. This is the second one in Europe. Here's Jazzman Volume 5. Esoteric, modal, and deep jazz from around the world, 61 to 79. Very nice finish, kind of a textured finish, a linen finish almost. This includes the Charlie Monroe Quartet, Jazz Workshop, Jazz Semi, Jorge Lopez Ruiz. I don't know any of these people. The London Experimental Jazz Quartet. Just, beautiful liner notes. I would get all these. These are a deep dive. These will open your head up. Spiritual Jazz 6, Vocals. This came out in this one is from 2013. Modal, esoteric, and progressive jazz vocals from around the world, 1960 to 1986. We have Max Roach, Charles Mingus, E.W. Wainwright, Clifford Jordan, Pharoah Sanders, Gary Bartz, Byron Morris, and it's not the usual tunes you might hear on a compilation. I almost bought, we have this new compilation in the store, Jazz Brazil, and it's a great, beautiful cover art of Ipanema Beach, beautiful photographs, but it's all material for people who are just now getting into Brazilian jazz, and that kind of attitude dominates a lot of compilations, but none of these Jazzman Spiritual Jazz volumes do this. Charles Mingus, Moves, Clifford Jordan Quartet, John Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, Prince of Peace. Again, tons of information about the recording, about the label, about the artist. the particular record they're sourcing from, and you need some powerful glasses to read these. Spiritual Jazz number 8, Esoteric Modal and Progressive Jazz from Japan, 61 to 1983, Japan Part 1. I love these covers. I haven't even listened to this one yet. Look at that little, looks like a, scan that for more info. Mitsuaki Kano, Tadao Hayashi, Takeo Moriyama, New Direction for the Arts, Sato Watanabe and Charlie Mariano, of course we know them. Jazzman Records Limited, Henley on Thames. Oh, and the liner notes are in English and Japanese. Wow, that level of care, you know? Like when they did this, the audience for this kind of thing was small. It's so great that they did it. Here's part 2 of the same series. Vocals, modal, esoteric, and ethereal jazz from Japan, 61 to 83, including 4 units. Kataro Miho, Kayoshi Sugimoto. I think these are probably expensive on Discogs, but these are wonderful and collector's items, no doubt, from Jazzman. This one is Spiritual Jazz Volume 9, Blue Notes Part 1. This is from 2018. The artists included Eddie Gale, Duke Pearson, Bobby Hutcherson, Pete LaRocca, Wayne Shorter, Elvin Jones, Andrew Hill. More in keeping with the current Blue Note fever, but beautifully done. And the last one I have, and there is a more current one that I don't have. This is part 2 of Blue Notes, part 2. Joe Henderson, Jackie McLean, Booker Ervin, Solomon Ilori, Hank Mobley. Thanks for watching. If you like what I'm doing, push the button, click the rim,